Everyone. My name is Erin Martinovich. I'm the Vice President of University Advancement here at Alfred. We are delighted to have you join us for today's Inside Alfred with Mark Zupan. This is our second iteration of this insider's look at what's happening at the university. We're delighted that you could join us. A couple housekeeping items. Mark will be going through his presentation. He has a number of slides with some great information he'd like to share. If you have specific questions, please put them in the chat. We'll do a question and answer at the conclusion of Mark's presentation. And with that, allow me to introduce Mark Zupan, Alfred University's president.
Thank you very much, Erin. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're spanning coast to coast. Happy early St. Patrick's Day coming up on Friday. Greetings from snowy Alfred. And most of all, thank you for all of your ongoing involvement, insights, investment, and inspiration that you provide to our university. So we just finished last week a winter board meeting, and we'll play off what we presented and engaged with our board over the last several days of last week. And what we did was sought to strike a balance between the urgent. Enrollment's been a challenge the last 3 years due to COVID. We're a high-touch school, and there were certain challenges when you had to keep your distance, you had to engage in surveillance testing. So we're beyond that now, but how we navigate the enrollment and the associated financials. Then the strategic, how do we look forward? One of our board members remarked last week that we've got to be living in 2 time zones, both the very immediate, but then looking forward to the next several years and what we're going to do to keep improving as an institution. And a key step we've taken, we'll report on the end. Organizational architecture has to align with your strategy. And we've made some important changes in the structure of our team and the nature of our team over the last several months, last year and a half. It all comes back down to the answer to our why question. Why do we exist? And our purpose is to help our students identify and realize their purpose. We do it through 2 key ways, through our intersections and through our engagement mentoring. We only have 1 traffic light in town, but our intersections are plentiful and potent across our broad range of curricular, co-curricular offerings, the diverse backgrounds and aspirations of our students and employees. Our President's Committee on Diversity tomorrow will be hosting a campus conversation to which all our students, faculty, staff are invited. How do you engage in difficult conversations? It's an important power skill, like creative thinking, like leadership, like critical thinking, like team playing. Those ideally happen in college, but a lot of places people shy away from them. So benefiting from that diversity is important to us through experiential learning opportunities, through programs such as Apex, the power skills that I mentioned earlier, and then ultimately with professional opportunities. Where do our students end up wanting to take their Alfred University degrees? Engagement and mentoring occurs by faculty, staff, by fellow students, as well as by alums and friends. In terms of enrollment, key strategic steps we've been taking over the last several years, and we're starting to see the beneficial impact for this fall. We've time shifted forward when we market and how continuously market. 6 years ago, when I started, we were focused too much on reaching out to seniors. And for those of you that have had kids or grandkids, look at college, the decision-making starts much earlier than that, usually first year or second year in high school. So we need to be reaching students there. A key step that Jonathan Ken, our Vice President of Enrollment Management, and his team have been taking to broaden the impact of our AU Scholars Program. A key indicator of quality is identifying students that we believe will blossom at Alfred University. We've had an amazing track record in that regard. AU Scholars first started in the state of New York 3 years ago. It's now been expanded nationally. And we're looking for key influencers, coaches, guidance counselors, teachers at the high school level who will identify in the junior year, we believe so-and-so will really blossom at Alfred University. We've had a good track record of getting these nominated individuals to campus. There's a generous scholarship award made to the individuals, and we yield 20% of the nominees. So if you are aware of key influencers at the high school level, please let me know, and I will connect you with Jonathan. We intend to Right now, we're recruiting a group that in their junior year, there were 420 nominees. We'd like to broaden this to at least 2,000 national. So please be in touch with those key influencer connections, either your old high school or a high school you're nearby to or otherwise connected to. Your best candidates come early, so the earlier we can get out acceptances and financial aid offers, we're at least 6 to 7 weeks ahead of where we were last year on these important dimensions. Best predictor you'll come to Alfred is if you've come to visit. 45% of the individuals that are accepted that come to campus end up matriculating. If you are accepted, don't come to campus, the odds are 3% you'll end up matriculating. So we're playing up and we're continuing to underwrite visits to campus and creating events that attract people to campus. Yesterday, we had 2 engineering candidates from the state of Hawaii, both interested in track and field and cross country. One's already been accepted, one's in the process of applying. The odds that they'll join us from Hawaii go up dramatically once they've come to visit. And we've lost the screen share. Dan's going to plug the computer back in. Stay tuned. And I'll keep talking in the meanwhile. We're also focusing on the value our degrees provide. Instead of the broad degree, the more specific we can be. For example, in ceramic engineering, glass science, in biology with our virtual cadaver tables. So the more we can articulate where our graduates have gone, whether it's in the case of biology to be prominent, allelopathic, osteopathic, doctors working for firms such as Pfizer, Merck, Abbott Labs, Regeneron, teaching at the university level in biology. So the more examples we can illustrate in particular, it serves us well. We've been working with a company called Carnegie Dartlet to personalize the message. And instead of one size fits all, looking at demographics of applicants and fine-tuning our message. Coca-Cola, for example, would broadcast the same message to all prospective buyers, and they found it was much more effective. People watching a particular show, be it Friends, may draw a completely different demographic than somebody watching Oprah Winfrey. So being more attuned to that. What peers have told us using customized darts from this firm Carnegie Dartlet and short video messages that reach our candidates on social media in particular, that it improves the yield between 2 and 5 percentage points. So this is the first year in the process, and we're going to be looking closely at how yield improves. The more personalized, the better. Before we switch, so right now our deans, whether they're writing customized notes to applicants when the applicants come to campus with their families, meeting with them to describe the value, what it's like in the College of Business, Liberal Arts and Sciences, School of Art and Design, et cetera. Last year, Jonathan had me running up to the Welcome Center and Alumni Hall to try to meet with as many families. It was a great idea, but logistically it wasn't working as well as we'd like. Sometimes the candidates would arrive early and then they would be waiting. You'd be slowing down their tour. So this year he's having me just record a brief video message where I can customize the message based on the major, the hometown, the extracurriculars the individuals involved with. The more personal our appeal, that's our strong suit as a small institution relative to institutions you may be applying to where you'll be one of 600 students in a chemistry class or a calculus class. Next slide. One of those days of personalization is President's Day. This is something that got started 4 years ago. We had our highest ever attendance this year, 138 candidates versus 104 last year. This is an invitation to our top accepted students. And we've already had quite a few yielded students, deposited students from the event. A key step that we took this year was also marrying more of our academic programs with the visit. So students got to sample what a class in School of Art and Design would be like, or engineering taught by some of our leading faculty. And a number of them were texting their family members just how exciting it was. Academics is still the #1 reason a prospect chooses a particular school, and this is something we're going to be doing going forward. Next slide. Two key enrollment appointments. We're looking at the DC area in particular to develop more of a pipeline. Two of the wealthiest counties, for example, are in the DC area. It's a growing area. It's only 5 hours away from Alfred. So we have a very active also Purple City group. So it doesn't take more than a few additional recruits from an area to justify having feet on the street in that particular market. And if it works in DC, we're going to be looking to do it in other areas, be it Boston, be it a place like New Jersey, et cetera. And then Kristen Vargason, a longstanding member and alumna, has been appointed Director of Enrollment, Strategic Planning and Transfers. And I'll mention her on the next slide as well. Something that we shared with our board in the fall, one of our trustees, Kevin Livingston, said, well, I always see the aspirations from the top down and you're aiming high, but I'd rather see something from the bottom up. So if you have a target of 450 new students for the fall, how are you going to get there through the various tactics you're employing? So we developed this granularity slide for the fall, and I'm going to walk you briefly through how these different initiatives are playing out and what they mean. They're listed in terms of rank order of impact. 2 years ago, we recruited 438 new matriculated undergraduate students, first years and transfers. Last year, 404. The target's 450 this year. Our most important initiative is driving more visits to campus. We wanted to at least hit 1,400 visits. We're on track to hit that. Last year, we were below 1,200. Again, the odds are close to 50% will enroll. So creating events that get people to campus. The Carnegie Dartmouth personalized advertising. We're still in process. We're going to be analyzing and looking at yield rates based on what other schools experienced, and us being early in the pilot. The estimate is 75 additional deposits from this program. Student athlete recruiting, we've been 115 to 120 students below our roster sizes the last couple of years. COVID put a real crimp on our student athlete recruiting, like our overall recruiting. So just within our existing sports, there's a huge upside. And there's a rule of thumb that if you'd like to attract one student athlete, you need to get at least 3 student athletes to campus that have been admitted. It's fairly standard across institutions, and getting in that mindset, this will probably be our biggest miss. We have an interim athletic director right now, Deb Stewart, with extensive experience. We're searching for a permanent, and what we're looking for is a coach of coaches, an individual who's been a coach, who's ideally coached coaches before, on how you build the funnel, and not just focused on so much on seniors, but getting people to campus as sophomores, juniors. You build more competitive teams. So of all the items on the chart, this one's probably our weak point, which means a year from now, there's a significant upside in terms of the enrollment we've seen. The first 2 items are on track. AU scholars, we're on track. We're looking for 30 additional deposits. We're still developing analytics. How much can you yield by improved marketing, by major, by value? We'll have some better analytics at the end of the year. We're well ahead in terms of timing. That matters. I'll share with you some statistics why we believe that's driving the positive increase we're seeing this year. STEAM has been a key strategic initiative. We expect to draw over time over 200 additional students because of BS programs we've been adding in biology, chemistry, mathematics, physics, biochemistry, astronomy, sustainability, our strength in the arts. We've added an electrical engineering program. This is, or not added, but restarted it. This is the first year we're expecting at least 10 students. This will start to show more students over time. Business and data analytics is fairly new, but for the fall, we're expecting at least 25 additional deposits. Casanova, as you might have heard, 200-year-old school east of Syracuse is closing as of this semester. They have roughly 550 students. We're one of 10 schools with teach-out programs. We already have 20 applications from them. We have 3 deposits. Now we're trying to figure out ways how to get those accepted students to campus. They have a strong equestrian program. Our College of Business Dean, with our provost and COO, Beth Ann Doby, has designed an equine management program to mimic theirs. It's fairly rare to have an equine management program. We're aiming for more than 20, but the target is at least 20. And now the objective is to get them to campus. And this was where Christine Vargason, she's our one-stop point of contact, concierge, if you will, to make the process as seamless as possible for their transition and to design ways to get them to campus. Higher education opportunity programs, these really took a hit at our school as well as at other schools during COVID. We've been in the low teens, if not lower, the last several years. We're looking to be up at least 20 students, and Jonathan added somebody in particular to market to HEOP students, a staff member. And these initials that you see, JK, for example, is Jonathan Kent, our Vice President of Enrollment Management. They refer to a particular cabinet member who's most on point for succeeding with that initiative. We're going to be moving toward a direct admission program. This is something RPI instituted in particular for engineering, just being quicker to respond with key influencers. Saxon Hill is in its early phase. We're right now in the design phase. This will add at least 7 sports. It'll allow us to add recreational intramural opportunities. We're in the process of hiring a women's rugby coach. We're expecting to add at least some students even before aspects of this get built, because we'll have coaches or recruiters, but it's lower on the list. And then we've been building more community-based organization partnerships. We've had a turnover in staff and Jonathan's team. So it'll be a small number this year, but over time we look to expand that number. So if you add it all up, it's looking to expand significantly over the 404. So our aim is pretty high, but then what the last 2 rows do is there's some double or triple counting among our different rows above the line. For example, an electrical engineering student may also want to play women's lacrosse sports and may also come to campus to visit. So that number would show up 3 different times in the top rows. And then you also have to assume that not everything's going to work. For example, student athlete recruiting, we know we're not going to hit plus 75. So what we did from the get-go in the fall is to assume half our initiatives work. That's where you end up dividing that 356 by 2 to get to the 178. And then assuming triple counting. And we think both of those assumptions are conservative, but it gives us assurance, it gives our board with their fiduciary responsibilities, the assurance that we'll be at least 59 above last year's 404. Next slide. And this hasn't been updated yet. This was from last week. In each of our academic units, we're ahead of the game in apps, in accepts, in deposits. And this includes international and domestic. The most reliable statistic, 2 years ago, we were struck by how many international deposits that ended up not matriculating. They didn't get visas, they hadn't come to visit. So our most reliable indicator is looking at domestic deposits. As of this morning, we're at 182 domestic deposits, either first years or transfers. 2 years ago, we were at 126, so a delta of 56. And 2 years ago, we ended up with 438 students. So we're feeling pretty bullish that we will hit 450, but we are not taking anything for granted based on how tough the last 3 years. We want to blow by the target of 450. Next slide. We've been focusing on STEAM, and this is as of March 9th last week. Electrical engineering has been restarted. Computer science is seeing healthy growth. Business and data analytics are seeing healthy growth. Right now, any one of those majors, the job prospects are bright. Next slide. If you had to identify right now over the next 48 days, our 3 priorities: admissions, admissions, admissions. The more we can personalize. We have key yield events on campus, accepted student days in April. We have 7 events. David and Beebs Miller hosted an event for us in San Francisco. Kristen Klaben, one of our trustees, will be hosting an event at her husband's company in downtown Manhattan. We have trustees that have stepped up to host events for us throughout the state of New York. We'll be doing an accepted student day later this month in Washington, D.C. So even if they can't come to us, we'll come to them and apply the personal touch. We will keep expanding. Jonathan and his team brought us a Saxon signing day. We're moving it up to 4/29. May 1st is the target date for decisions. And if you deposit by 4/29, you're guaranteed housing and course choices. Next slide. Ways you can help. Hosting off-campus yield events. If there's an interest in helping us in that way, whether it's in the Boston area, whether it's on the West Coast, please let us know. Contacting admitted students. There's no better testimony than an alum saying, I blossomed at Alfred, and you will too. And so we can get you a list of individuals broken down by geography, reaching out to them to say, I hope you'll come. Makes a difference, especially from alumni. Again, what I mentioned, promoting AU Scholars Program. Link us up to the key influencers you're aware of at the high school level. If you're aware of applicants, and we will share a copy of these slides too, so you have them for reference, but if you're aware of a grandkid or a child or a niece and nephew that we should be reaching out to, please let us know. Marlon Miller started a Saxon Circle Scholarship Program. This is a lift up from the $1,000 a year commitment, where if it's a commitment of $5,000 a year, we will devote your support specifically to a student throughout the course of their studies at Alfred. And it helps us promote student engagement and mentoring. It creates an extra set of godparents, in a sense, that'll help navigate that student through and help them blossom at Alfred University. And we're expecting now a larger than budgeted class. So it's really critical for us to invest in first impressions and make sure the residence halls, the Welcome Center and Alumni Hall, the Powell Campus Center, that these, where the students are spending a lot of time, that we're going to be putting our best foot forward, because we'd hate to attract all these students and then lose them because they find the housing to be subpar or other amenities associated with their Alfred experience. Next slide. We're especially grateful to one of our trustees. He's adopted us. He's from the Boston area. Although we went to other places, he's an Alfredian at heart. Believes in college being a place where people can blossom, even if they've struggled before. And he and his wife, Lynn, they were with us for the board meeting last week, have made a significant impact to help us upgrade our Welcome Center and Alumni Hall to upgrade. By coincidence, we were driving back from Olean yesterday, and we heard from an alum, Don Weaver, class of 1980. He in particular, and we'll find out more of the story for those of you that remember back when we had a kissing bridge near the Brick, where the Brick was devoted to just female students and where male and female students would say goodnight across the Canacadia. He surprised us yesterday by saying he'd like to make a gift to reestablish that. We think it'll be a wonderful memory, but also create important intersections for our current students. We have a need at the present time for the Carolot. So if that's something meaningful to you, that's a point of distinction for us. It needs some repairs in the bells and the infrastructure. So keep that in mind. First impressions and then memorable impressions matter. Next slide. Now looking into the further time zone. What are important steps beyond this year? The management team visited Elon University in North Carolina. The former president of Elon was one of the 3 emeriti presidents that Marlon Miller provided underwriting for, so they could help raise our strategic game. And we were very impressed in particular with the former president of Elon. This person moved the needle where they're now a top 90 school nationally. They used to be just a regional player. And in every category of student experience that US News rates schools on, they're in the top 20, including teaching quality, where they're rated top in the country, ahead of a little known school in New Jersey by the name of Princeton. And they have something very similar to our Apex program. But what they shared with us during our visit is how different it is in its operation. We right now provide a scholarship grant, for example, for $10,000 a year for 4 years to an incoming student. And then in your sophomore year, you can apply for an Apex grant of up to $1,000. And then you can devote it to study abroad. You can devote it to research, to a co-op experience. What they do differently is they award a scholarship grant of $7,000 a year, but up front provide more for applied experiential learning opportunities, a $3,000 grant. So the total amount committed is the same as ours up front. But what they found by awarding it up front, it helps to attract students. It helps to better retain them because you can't access the $3,000 until you make it through that first year. And then it creates a richer array of experiences through providing more significant funding. And they actually generate a second transcript for all students. One is the regular academic transcript, but the other is Apex style opportunities where you're in a leadership position with student government, with a club. Did you study abroad? Did you do a co-op? And what they found is that's been a particularly powerful transcript for lining up internships and jobs for their students. So we're going to be exploring this with Jonathan Kent, with Beth Ann Doby, our Provost COO. In particular, can we shift more to their model? And then always looking at how can we highlight the value of our education. We met with each of our counterparts. Leo Lambert is the former president of Elon. He brought together his former team. It was great to see what happens when everybody's rowing in the same direction and they trust each other. We have a really good team right now rowing in the same direction. And one of their former team members said, right now on your landing page, you highlight how if you come to campus, you automatically get $1,000 off of tuition for each of 4 years. Stress more the value, what alums have done with the degree. Don't be so upfront with the $1,000 discount. So we're going to be moving away from that, following that advice. We will still provide underwriting to get people to campus, but we won't be so front and center, and we won't be using price as the means, but rather the value. And you do that through a variety of, and I'll talk about it later. Next slide. Financials. We have an interim CFO who was with us for many years as our controller, Tammy Raub. She started with us in January, and she's been doing an amazing job in just less than 3 months with us. Right now, we're still on track for a $2 million deficit for this year. And next year will be more significant. We're working to see how much less than 4 million we can create. And this is where it's real important. The larger the class we can bring in, that is significantly going to make our financial position better, not just next year, but following years, because students stay with you for 4 to 5 years. But because of 3 slow years during COVID, fiscal year 24 is going to be a more challenging one to navigate. Cash flow wise, we're in a good position. We don't anticipate an issue until fiscal year 25 at the very earliest if we hit our targets. And what Tammy conveyed to our board is if you recruit 100 more students, that brings in roughly $2 million more per year. And it's not a 1-year phenomenon. So if we bring in 100 more students than budgeted for the fall, over the next several years, that'll amount to at least $5.25 million in added revenue to our bottom, added net revenue to our bottom line. And if we can improve retention, which we're in the process of doing, it means more than $5.25 million. So we're laser-like focused right now on the next 48 days and how much can we exceed the target. And then Tammy, I've been here now 6.5 years. And Tammy's, I finally understand how our budget operates. I used to and our board had the same reaction when she brought them up to speed last week. We rely on something called fund funds accounting. And in the business world, it's akin to a conglomerate where you have different divisions, different operations. The core operating budget that we've disproportionately focused on is just 70% of the picture. Philanthropy, research grants, many of those flow through separate accounts. It's as if you had 600 different checking accounts. So when we get a new grant from the federal government, we set up a new checking account for that particular purpose. And then money flows out of it and money flows in aligned with that particular purpose. When an alum endows a particular scholarship, that again is a new checking account. In managing the whole enterprise, what matters is the overall picture and not 70% of just the operating budget. The key point here is philanthropy has been, and research grants have been key parts of our success. Casanova was not successful, as successful by any means when it came time to philanthropy. That's why they've ended up closing. So it's instructive for us. It's not just enrollment, but on these other key dimensions, we've got to keep building on the past success. Next slide. In terms of finance, key objectives for Tammy and her business and finance team. Identify other opportunities to get us back into the black. She's been meeting regularly with deans and VPs. How do we maximize the use? Most of our academic units, most of our VPs, thanks to generous philanthropy, also have access to philanthropic-based accounts that can be designated for particular purposes within their purview. And if we can grow those over time, it will become less reliant on tuition dollars, moves us more quickly into the black. Then working with our COO, our provost, how do we identify investments in residence life, in our people, in our educational spaces, in our dining experience that will most move the needle? Our main thing is the student experience. And Beth Ann, our COO, also works very closely with Tammy, our CFO, on assessing academic unit productivity. So you might have seen recently there was a big flap at Utica. They were going to shut down 17 programs, including chemistry and physics, which if you want to do anything in the health sciences space, is crazy to be thinking about shutting down majors like that. They were focused disproportionately on the number of majors those degrees were producing. And what Tammy found in her former life, what really matters is student credit hour productivity. In our case, for example, our chemistry and physics faculty produce a lot of student credit hours. They account for a lot of the teaching of our engineering program, for example, and a lot of teaching, not just in liberal arts, but in our other academic units. And you've got to focus on that productivity when making decisions, which positions not to fill. What our academic deans are on board with, given the last 3 years of enrollment related to COVID, that we need to invest first and foremost in the student experience, getting students here, keeping them here. So marketing activities, enrollment activities, advancement activities. It doesn't matter so much whether our student faculty ratio is 11-to-1 versus 13-to-1. So where we can hold off on replacing a faculty hire and conserve scarce faculty resources, that's part of our game plan near term. Our provost has also raised the minimum class size, and this is something we learned from our visit to Elon, that you need at least 7 students to run a class versus 5. We can conserve faculty resources for some more in-demand teaching when we do that, and then stretch our dollars more productively toward the student experience. Next slide. For those of you in business, you know the 4 P's of marketing: price, product, promotion, and price. Pre-2016, we led with price. We primarily tried to compete with SUNY schools through our discount rate. Product was generally strong, came in second. Promotion, we were doing very little of. Place, we tried to hide. Nowadays, and the Elon visit reinforced for us, we need to keep our foot on the pedal on promotion, the value, because we need to create this virtuous cycle that will drive net revenue, that will drive our future success. And then how do we further enhance the product, curricularly to co-curricularly? Saxon Hill is all about better living into our place, not hiding. We cannot be embarrassed. We've got to be proud of our place. It has many virtues. Play up those virtues. And the last thing we want to play up is price, because the less we do of it, the more resources we create to our success, to being able to compensate our employees. Next slide. You probably saw Washington Post named us America's collegiate town. We were far ahead of number 2. close to 80% of our population, college students between Alfred University and Alfred State. We have been playing this up to the hilt. Just the atmosphere that can bring in a college town like ours. Next slide. In terms of marketing communications, we have a new vice president as of the fall, Mark Daines, who's brought a lot of wisdom, headed up 3 shops at the university level, had a lot of experience in creative ad agency. It's in the New York City area. Moving forward, a key thing will be making sure our intersections, engagement, and mentoring as distinctive advantages are embedded as much as possible into our events, into our various media, into our people. So when we do our April admitted student events, making sure that the student panels are emphasizing our points of distinction. When we revise our website, making sure that those themes, those points of distinction are coming through. When we do summer orientation sessions, an emphasis on that. And then making sure from our tour guides to our faculty staff that they are emphasizing these points of distinction. 2.5 weeks ago, went to an evening of dance that our performing arts people put on. And can't tell you how heartening on the opening night, Chase Anger, one of our faculty, came to me and said, all these students that were participating, they come from across each of our academic units. That's intersections and that's mentoring. It's very heartening when it starts to be woven into the vernacular to that extent. And we're going to have to also remember that it's important from a student perspective as well as from a university perspective. How do students get the most out of our intersections and out of our engagement mentoring? Many come from families where parents didn't go to college. So we're going to, Leo Lambert, the former president of Elon, has written a second book from the student perspective. It's available free of charge through the Johns Hopkins University. We're going to be sharing a few of those chapters with students and also emphasizing to them how they can get the most out of our intersections and out of our engagement mentoring. What we found at Elon, when they do their convocation, Elon means oak in Hebrew. They were in pretty bad shape in the 1940s. They had lost their accreditation, were at risk of going out of business. And then they started to really focus on the student experience. One of the meaningful events they do is at convocation, they give an acorn out to each of the students. And when the students graduate, they give a sapling, an oak sapling, that the student can then plant wherever they end up being planted. So we're thinking along those lines, whether it's a candle along Fiat Lux, whether it's a ceramic tile, a glass artifact, and perhaps just a state-of-the-art application where we highlight this again at convocation, but encourage students to keep an electronic diary. How Jim Varner made a big impact on me as a teacher, or a coach like a Cliff DeBrill made a big impact. So we can we can focus all the magic that's happening on campus. The more we highlight it, the more of it we'll see happening on campus. Next slide. Academic affairs. We're very much not defining quality in terms of just board scores and GPA. We'll take all the perfect scores on the SAT we can get, but our history has been people that have blossomed at Alfred. So getting really good at identifying, and especially through the AU Scholars Program. Ongoing curricular innovation. We have a significant project through philanthropy and SUNY construction funding, the Foundry Distributed Boiler Project, that's expected to add at least 100 students in steady state. That'll be done by 2024. So we've got to be ramping up. How do we draw the additional sculpture three-dimensional studies program? How do we develop more signature programs, more metallurgy programs, more 3D printing programs that span our art and design and engineering? How do we get better at engagement and mentoring? We already assign each student, faculty member, staff member. Each student has a library resource member, but how do we grow more of an organic model that you can never quite predict where the chemistry will work, but developing more potential points of contact where it's done and then celebrated. And a key part, students spend a lot of time in our educational spaces and third spaces. So if you've been to Sideland Hall recently, it doesn't have air conditioning, just how it's laid out, it's got to be as conducive to learning. What we found at Elon, all their classrooms have movable furniture. So it promotes intersections in the classroom. The faculty spaces are consciously designed around pods, and staff spaces, 4 to 5, around a common meeting area. So it's more likely to promote mentoring engagement. Winston Churchill is famous for his quote that first you design your buildings, or first you shape your buildings, then they shape you. And we've got to be mindful of that going forward, the thought we put into the infrastructure and how that ends up shaping, enhancing our intersections and mentoring. Next slide. Student experience, we'll share some statistics shortly on retention. An army marches on its stomach, and students spend a third of their time in residence halls. So we've got to worry about the core layers of Maslow's hierarchy. And where we struggled the most, there's an outfit called Niche that rates each school. Where we do the worst right now is in dining and residence life. So we've been spending a lot of time over the last few months raising our game. And then engagement and mentoring are more substantive, higher up Maslow's hierarchy. Next slide. We've seen some improvement in fall to spring retention. We are devoting much more effort to checking in on students. At the same time, we face more of a headwind in this regard. The students that entered in the fall had 3 years of diminished high school learning. And so some of the emotional, the mental health and wellness issues we've seen, it's a bigger tail. And making sure we're meeting students where they are, but still holding them accountable. So we're putting new systems in place, but realistically, we and as well as other schools have been facing more headwinds this year, as we even more so than last year. So we're proud of that improvement in light of those increased headwinds. Next slide. We have a fabulous new vice president of student experience, Amy Decay, joined us with 25 years experience. And when I did due diligence with her president, said, I'm probably going to lose my job if you get her. She's fabulous. She's been a rock star on our campus. And that's proven to be the case all around. He ended up leaving his job a week after we announced we were hiring her. Among other things, she's been organizing more larger scale activities, worked with our students on a recent masquerade ball, very much lived the brand with her purple outfit on that day. So she's brought a lot of wisdom on how we improve student athlete recruiting, for example, how we better use our existing student advising resources, how we raise our game when it comes time to dining experience. We were rated on Niche a D+ in food relative to other schools. St. John Fisher, for example, up the road is an A-. So February 18th, we gave notice to AU Fresh, our provider, that they had 60 days to cure. We've seen some improvements already, but we've set some very specific markers. It's been a common bone of contention among our students. We need to raise our game. And Amy's also been working with our provost COO and our CFO on what can we do to make sure each of the rooms is in shape for when our students arrive. The bathrooms have to be working. The paint, the absence of chips, the furniture has to be adequate. Next slide. Moving forward, the scenario we're going to have to keep our eyes on, and then what investments do we need to make to raise our game in engagement and mentoring? For example, through another trustee, Michelle Cohen, we took our students to places like Letchworth Park, like the New York State Fair, like Jiva Theater. So how do they bond through those experiences? Amy every week puts out, these are the top 5 to 6 things going on our campus this weekend. We're a small place and getting the most out of what we're doing on campus and beyond. Next slide. A special shout out, and she'll be receiving an honorary degree, we think this May, if we can get her to campus and Moskowitz. She and Joel Moskowitz, an alum of ours and former board member, have been incredibly generous supporters. Anne in particular and Joel have steered their support toward residence life. We were out visiting with her in Southern California. She made another major commitment to help us in that regard. Next slide. University advancement. Erin Martinovich, who you met at the beginning, has been with us now for 15 months. And just what she's brought to the equation has been breathtaking. Her key priorities, she's been building her team. She had a pretty small team. There was an important rebuilding job that needed to be done. She's beefed up the team over the last few months. Now focused on how can we get budget relieving gifts because of COVID. We've got some challenges and ways that we can rely on philanthropy as opposed to tuition dollars. How do we secure support for university priority projects? Saxon Hill is projected to add 125 students in steady state. Add to our sustainability offerings. It's a $20 million project. We need to raise at least $10 million in philanthropic support. As of yesterday, we were at $4.6 million in cash in hand or commitments in place. We met with a particular alum yesterday who we believe is interested in making a $5 to $10 million gift and is especially interested in this project. So fingers crossed. And then, like I mentioned earlier, building out our Purple City network. We're going to be in New York City, in Boston, in Rochester, Buffalo. We started this program. COVID put a slowdown on it. We will be in DC with our Purple City group at the end of the month. Bruce Chamberlain, I believe, is part of the Zoom call. Very generous supporter, active leader in the group. Bruce is providing the underwriting for reception, for the hotels. We're bringing close to 30 students down. We're going to be doing a leadership symposium with them. An alum and trustee, Brian Hill, will be the keynote speaker. He's the county executive in Fairfax County, Virginia. Tom Reed, our alum ex-congressional rep, will be speaking to the students. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Ali Mayorkas, and his wife, Tanya, have a daughter that's going to be joining our School of Art and Design in the fall. Tanya is going to be hosting our students for a reception at their home in Georgetown Thursday night. Ali arranged for a tour of the White House for our students on Friday morning. And we'll be doing an event with prospective students. So we view this model as building out our intersections, our mentoring, allowing us to attract students. If it works in DC, we can map it out in other places. Next slide. Chief Operating Office structure. This came out of the 3 Emeriti presidents to identify somebody who would be my right-hand person and who would oversee everything associated with promoting the student experience. So our enrollment management head, Jonathan, our vice president for student experience, Jonathan Kent, as of July, began reporting to Beth Ann Doby, and was very grateful to Jonathan and Amy to say, look, whatever's best for the institution, we'll work with Beth Ann, and for Beth Ann to be willing to help us in this particular way. Next slide. And what it does is it better aligns what we do. For example, student retention. To improve, we need to be looking at what happens in the enrollment process, how early we're connecting with people, how we're onboarding them, what happens on the academic side of the house, what happens on the student experience side of the house. It then better aligns to what we do in terms of philanthropy. Our main thing is the student experience, so Beth Ann can interact with Erin and say, look, these are our biggest needs that we have, and this should be at the top of the list. When it comes time to facilities and identifying where do we need to make those investments, Beth Ann can work with Tammy Robb, our facilities head, our finance head, and marketing communications. We only have so much staff time, so how do we focus that effort? Which academic programs, which co-curricular programs? The more seamless, the better. Next slide. And the more we own it. So when there's an issue, it's not they did it, but it's our issue that we're going to resolve because we're part of the same team. Our message to the board is we've seen the benefits to our management team of all rowing in the same direction. That's something we've been stressing to our entire campus community. We've got to be all in for Alfred. Our message to our board last week was we've got to be all in for Alfred. And that's the same message to all of you. The more we're rowing in the same direction, we're going to be able to realize Alfred University's promise. We can't do it all, so we're not relying on a spaghetti at the wall, but what's the core issue? How do we research and propose a solution? And then how do we assess if it's working or not? Next slide. And then keep focused on our strategic goals. We develop as a management team, what are our core goals for the university any given year? What are the core unit goals for each VP? How do they map in? If you're going to propose an improvement, we're aiming to become more entrepreneurial. We've established guidelines to make those proposals. And then what criteria do we have for making those decisions of investing scarce resources? And it all comes back to what will most advance the student experience. Next slide. So we've covered the urgent, the enrollment and financials, and the time zone of looking forward, and then this new organizational architecture and philosophy that we've been adopting over the past year. Next slide. Our purpose, our answer to the why again, is to help our students identify, realize their purpose. Next slide. We do it through intersections and engagement and mentoring. Next slide. Next slide. And before we get to comments and questions, sometimes there's karma that works in your favor. If you've noticed wearing a purple St. Patty's Day necklace, that came about through our board chair, Carolyn Clark, who's our first female board chair. She's a 1990 graduate of ours, an all-American soccer player, a communications grad, an amazingly successful entrepreneur and leader. She wanted to do something fun with the board. So she suggested a 2-hour dinner cruise so that they could see the sunset. And it underscores the importance of living the brand. Mark Daines is to the left. Beth Ann Doby is right next to me on the right. Teresa McMahon Marshall is the person next to Beth Ann and Mark Daines. Focus on the word McMahon in the middle of her name. So we're entering this dinner cruise boat, and John Edmund, who's one of our trustees, who helped start Wolfspeed, that's now traded on the New York Stock Exchange. It's been amazingly successful as a firm. They're building the world's largest silicon carbide manufacturing plant in Marcy, New York, was wearing his Alfred University name tag. Terry looks at the name tag and says, "You're from Alfred." Turns out Terry is John McMahon's granddaughter. Both her father and mother went to our institution. Her dad ended up becoming an engineer as a ceramic engineering grad of ours for Intel. A number of patents passed away. Her mom is an English major, still living in the Phoenix area. She has 30,000 photos on her smartphone associated with her grandfather and his impact on Alfred University. She's one of 7 kids. She and a twin sister were born on October 1st, the same day as John McMahon's birthday. And John, for those of you that knew him, was an amazingly impactful figure to our university. Was St. Patrick. Today's the 90th year that this week is the 90th year we're celebrating St. Patrick's Day as a university. Had this leprechaun type quality, wonderful at promoting intersections. He's the reason Marlon Miller, among many other students, joined Alfred University. And then Terry and her husband, Art, who we also met, have twins who were born on October 1st. And she pointed to the sky. She said, "My grandfather would be happy that this intersection happened." We're going to hope to get her back for commencement so that she can meet Marlon Miller, share some of her stories about her grandfather. We wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day. She also shared the story of, you probably remember Wally Higgins, an alum of ours at Tuskegee Airmen, distinguished service to our country, started off as a staff member in our School of Art and Design. And in the 1950s, as inclusive as we've been, there was still some resistance to appointing a Black as a faculty member. John McMahon made it happen, said it was a no-brainer. And then when John McMahon passed away, Wally was the one that created the urn that held John's ashes. So there's a lot more. We're hoping all the memorabilia, Terry and her husband Art have many bins, artifacts, many artifacts from her grandfather. We're going to hope to gravitate those to our library, to our archives. But it was one of those kismet moments to run into her and to realize how Alfred University makes the world small. So To her, to all of you, happy St. Patrick's Day. Thanks for joining, and got some time for questions, and we can quit screen share.
So Mark, I think with your incredible sharing, I think you answered a lot of questions already. We do have one question from Gary. Have we given consideration to cooperating with A State to improve the physical appearance of the downtown area?
We're meeting pretty much monthly, and by coincidence, just got a note from my counterpart this morning. We've got a Zoom call set up for Friday morning, and we meet regularly with our alumna, Becky Prophet, our village mayor. What grants can we secure? What businesses can we start in town? We've got 3 of our trustees now scheming, how can we build a craft brewery in town? Because it'd be such a great addition, great for the students, great for the community. And perhaps it could be something that's run combination by our business students managing the enterprise, our glass students designing some of the mugs. So anything that we can do to improve the student experience. And our town, Main Street, is first impression, and it's got to look good to draw students to both places. We've marketed the Washington Post article too jointly, and we've created a joint op-ed with the village mayor about what it's like to be from America's collegiate town.
Thank you. And from Ron Feinstein, in addition to mentors, what role of faculty academic advisors have in helping with retention? For example, proactively reaching out, frequency of meetings, advice, etc.
And we're looking at best practices there, and some small things, for example, that we've been encouraging that we learned at Elon. They don't call them office hours. They call them student hours. The importance in your class of getting to know each of your students by name early on. We already have a 4-week early warning sign and assignment and that's the best practice too at other institutions. And then making sure you're holding people accountable. We met with an alum. He lives in Cincinnati, but was visiting some friends. Eric Collins, a ceramic engineering alum. And he said, I was in a chemistry class and I'd done pretty well in the high school. Wes Bentz's chemistry class. And for those of you that had Wes as a teacher, he said there was never a standard top score. So Wes didn't use 100, sometimes it was 90, sometimes it was 127. And the first exam he gave me was a total of 127, and he said I got 29. And Wes said, he scrawled a note at the top in big writing, come see me. And when Eric Collins, our alum, came to see him, he knew him by name. Even though he'd been sitting in the back, Eric couldn't believe it because didn't think he was on his radar screen in this class of 42. And he worked with him on developing better study skills. Eric ended up going on the dean's list, had a successful career at GE, and now has been a serial entrepreneur and has established a generous endowment in honor of Wes and the impact. So the more we can celebrate those occasions, build those systems, it's incumbent on us to do that building. And if you've seen a best practice at another institution, let us know too. But that was very illuminating for us to be able to visit and check under the hood what's worked at Elon. And looking at Leo Lambert's book, their former president, because he recounts across other institutions what's working and what doesn't work.
Keeping on the Elon theme, Mark, wishful thinking, but has the university thought about what a maximum enrollment could be? Elon had such a target in the early 2000s.
Yeah, Elon was about our size when they lost their accreditation. And they thought maximum 2,000. And they are now close to 7,000. And it hasn't lost its feel to it. But the architecture matters to preserving that feel. And what they found is growth creates opportunity for investment and enriching the student experience. So we've got a bit of a ways to go to get to 2,000. That's our near-term goal over the next 5 years. But we'll keep taking measured steps, and that growth model made a big impression on us. They're meticulous when you go to visit. It took us a full day, as Aaron can relate, to find the first piece of trash on campus. You'd go running in the morning, and there'd be custodial crews working at 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 7 o'clock at night. So the importance of first impressions. So Jim Jordan, another trustee that's made a major gift to help us with the landscaping. Those are important things for us to be mindful of, because when students are coming to visit with their families, they're looking at stuff like that. And how well do you take care of the grounds is an indicator of how well you're going to take care of me.
One more question, Mark. What can you tell us about the bridge project at the stoplight?
That starts this month, or sorry, 2 months. They first got to build a bypass. It's a county-sponsored project. They're going to start after commencement on May 13th. It'll ultimately create a better structure. Another way that somebody can help us is better demarcating our entrances with something distinctive. So that's another way to market, to create that first impression, to create that welcoming. The bridge will help in that regard, but we've also been brainstorming. I think it's the class of 1924 that created the stone pillars at the main entrance to campus. But there used to be a sign years ago too, majoring in the human experience. So how could we at the stoplight, the traffic light entrance, also create a point of distinction, a way to show now you're at Alfred?
Well, you have answered all of our questions today, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, we're available by email with any follow-up questions. And again, key influencers, ways you can help identify those. We're deeply grateful for all of your ongoing support for our institution and your willingness to pay it forward. We're in a stronger position nowadays because of the folks on this Zoom call. But how do we keep that momentum going for the next generation? Because what we're able to do will hinge critically on the support of individuals like you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. We really appreciate it. As Maggie had said, we'll be sending out the slide deck for you if you have any other questions. And the meeting was recorded, so others who weren't able to be with us can enjoy this presentation as well. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.